Would you like to play some football?
And welcome to another edition of Gridiron the Gospel, a faith and college football podcast. My name is George Schroeder, joined by Dean and Sarah, and we are not quite in the books for week one as we record this on Monday evening. TCU and North Carolina are playing, and the much anticipated debut of Bill Belichick in the college ranks. And so we're not going to be able to really dive into that. But boy, what a great week one it was on a personal level for you, Dean, as you got to go down and watch a game last night, the Sunday night game, Miami and Notre Dame, but so many other great games. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, well, one thing I'd like you to talk about just for a minute for our newer listeners is we're not just two random pastors talking college football. Well, I am, but yeah, tell them about your most recent position before you went into ministry with the USA Today. What you exactly, you don't like to talk about yourself, but what you were doing. I want folks to know more about your background before we jump into everything. So, what were you doing most recently in college football?
Well, if we'll go any further, you're not a random pastor. I'd be the random pastor if we're going to do that. So I'm a pretty newbie. I don't think that's how you should say it, right? I'm a newbie in the world of lead pastoring, but grateful to be here. But yeah, for several decades, almost not quite 3 decades, I was in sports journalism. And for the last 2 decades of that, I was in covering college football in one way or the other. And then most recently spent 7-8 years at USA Today covering college football. And yeah, it was a tremendous gig. I really enjoyed it. I'm super glad that the Lord called me to where he's called me to. Not that wasn't a ministry, but it was. But I love where I am. I guess because of that, when Brad Edwards and I started thinking about a podcast, we were thinking, okay, we're both followers of Christ. And Brad Edwards, of course, has stepped away this season, but is going to join us for some games, although I want to get into that in a second. But he was a former ESPN college football analyst. And of course, I was a former USA Today journalist before God called me into ministry. And we wanted to kind of keep our toes dipped in the water of college football and maybe trade on some institutional knowledge we might have and share some stories and talk about what's going on this week, last week, whatever else, and just sort of use that as an entree to be able to tell people about our shared faith in Christ. And that probably leads me back to you. You are a longtime friend of the podcast and frequent guest. And so when Brad and I talked over the summer and he said, hey, he'd like to step away from hosting weekly, I knew one guy I wanted to call was you, because I know that you're not just a random pastor talking about college football. First of all, I appreciate you as a pastor and as a friend, and just kind of watching how you follow Christ and then how you lead well. But then secondly, you're actually, I don't know what I would say to this. I think I might say, yeah, you're a big time college football fan, but I think you're a thinking man's fan. Is that fair?
Hope so. I hope so. My coaching buddies always say, don't watch the game like a fan, watch it like a coach. And I always say, well, I am a fan.
It's hard.
They'll say, quit being a fan. When I comment on certain things or get worked up about something in a game, they'll say, you sound like a fan. Think about this. So, which I always appreciate that. It's fun.
Well, that's the thing about it. And I want to get into this at some point later in the podcast. But how many times have you been at a game when everybody around you knows a whole lot more than the coaches do? You know
every
what I mean?
Play.
Maybe it's you.
Every snap.
It could be you. It could be me sometimes, right?
That's right. Yeah.
But it's every snap. I can't believe they did that. Everybody could see that coming.
Every passing play that didn't work is too predictable. Every running play that didn't work should have been a throw. So that's how it works in our little world.
I'll tell you a quick story on that real quick. And we got to get into the actual events of the weekend, but quick story on that. When I was way back when I covered the University of Oklahoma on the beat as the beat reporter for the Oklahoma City newspaper, the Oklahoman, they had a quarterback competition one August camp, and they actually had open-ish practices. And so I was told to do like up arrows and down arrows for the 3 quarterbacks. There's really 2 that were really in competition each day. And I was like, you're just going to get me in trouble with the coaches because none of us have any idea what just actually happened on the play that we even got to watch. Did the receiver zig when he should have zagged? You know what I mean? You don't know what happened.
There's always more to it.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. So a great first weekend. Let me start with that. A great first weekend.
Absolutely.
And really, Texas at Ohio State was probably the headliner, but there were so many. There were so many good top 10 matchups, and all of them really lived up to the billing in terms of being really good or at least super interesting games. So why don't we start with the dumpster fire that's burning in Tuscaloosa, though? I know we can talk about the Arch Manning stuff and all of that, and we'll get to it. But what Florida State did, this was not a top 10 matchup because Florida State, nobody knew what to expect after they went 2-10. But you're in Tallahassee. What Florida State did to Alabama is great in Tallahassee, so we should start there. But then we also know what's going on in Tuscaloosa right now, what that attitude is like.
Yeah, well, we had a lot of great environments, a lot of great matchups, but I'm not sure we saw a lot of great football. It's first game of the season.
That's right.
It's a little sloppy. We got a lot of punts, a lot of fumbles, a lot of things like that across the board. So Tallahassee, I don't know if anyone really expected, for that to happen. I think anyone's lying if they said they did. I'm joking with my friends here about storming the field for beating a team that's gone 5-5 in their last 10 games. But I bring that up. The University of Alabama is 5-5 in their last 10 games. And that includes a loss at Vanderbilt behind the J. Alexanders at Vanderbilt University, and also to a very bad Oklahoma team, last year.
As bad an Oklahoma team as we've seen in a while.
Yeah, by their standards especially. So obviously Alabama has a different universe of standards. They might be number one in terms of their patience, meter, not being very large. So I think that it's going to be a really rough couple weeks. Up there, they play Wisconsin in 2 weeks. Wisconsin's not very strong, but I think those kind of games they're still vulnerable to, because we saw a team that had a lot of, I just lacked urgency. I'm watching the game going, do they care? I mean, who am I to say that from the couch? But then everybody else started asking the same question. You're seeing guys loafing on plays. You're seeing uninspired football. And that's what you're hearing more from just the fan base. And the media was saying the same thing. They seem uninspired. They seem undisciplined. Florida State was Florida State's Super Bowl, and Alabama acted like they didn't want to be there. That's a recipe for a disaster.
Well, and you also had, first of all, I would add one more adjective that they seem like they were soft.
Yes. What would you ever say about Alabama football?
Defensively,
that they're
soft. And shout out to Gus Malzahn, who is the new offensive coordinator, and obviously there's a guy who knows how to beat Alabama.
Castellanos, it was making plays.
And Castellanos backed up all the crazy stuff he said about, hey, this ain't, Nick Saban's not coming back type stuff that he said in the offseason, backed it up. And now he's selling T-shirts. Did you know that? He's selling T-shirts, capitalizing on that, and whatever the phrase
not surprised.
was. Good for him, right? But it's a tremendous win for Florida State. I love watching people jump back on the Gus bus just because he's a friend, and I know he's a really good ball coach. But man, the Kalen DeBoer, we're in a position now where, what is he, 14 games in, I guess? We're now at a situation where you might not be calling it the Kalen DeBoer era. They're starting to think of error, right?
Yeah, especially because it's Alabama. I think he's almost lame duck status. I'm not trying to overreact or exaggerate, but I think it's there because you look at the schedule. I mean, they had to play LSU. They have to play Georgia, right? Georgia's on their schedule.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
And they're in
between the hedges this year.
Yeah, and they're the difference in the programs. Florida State before the season said if there's 4 games that Florida State's likely has a chance to lose, and it's Alabama, Clemson, Miami, and Florida, and it's like, man, if they could just win one of those games, that would be great. We'll pick out Alabama's 4 games. And if they just win one of those games, he might get fired. I mean, truly. That's where they're at with him, especially after that debacle. And he also had tipped to Florida State. I mean, it really was a perfect storm. We got Norvell, was coaching for his life. You got a new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, new quarterback, opened a new stadium, first game of the season, and Alabama comes in disinterested. I mean, what a perfect storm and they capitalized on it.
Mm-hmm.
They jumped all over it, and they looked better. I mean, they looked better than Bama during the game.
No, they did. They looked better, and who knows what FSU is going to end up being, right? We don't know, but because we wildly overreact to these games. I should have said that at the top, right? Week 1 we wildly overreact to, and week 2 as well, right? But it's week 1 we've got some great marquee matchups, positively or negatively. But Florida State looked pretty good, and maybe they're gonna maybe they're going to bounce back from the 2-10. That's certainly a pretty good deal. You mentioned that Kalen DeBoer is 5-5 in his last 10 games. That's after beating Georgia last September 28, 2024, and they started 4-0. And now they're losing to all those mediocre teams that you talked about. And so they're 1-3 in their last 4 games,
including two.
Well, and you yeah, no, it's really not good. And I just it's amazingly bad. But here's the number that is really important here, okay? Because let me explain one thing. Alabama is not Texas A&M. And what I mean by that is this. Yes, they have no patience, but the number is $70 million. That's the buyout.
And they don't have oil money. They're not poor.
They can find it if they want it,
they
right?
Could find
you could
it.
Probably find it in the couch cushions of Nick Saban's Mercedes dealership. But
yeah, it always miraculously seems to appear at all these schools that claim they have no money and the buyouts are so big.
I'm just saying they're at like a critical point. If they don't like just turn this thing around from here on out and find their way into the playoff, and as you said, what makes you think they're going to based on that? You know, maybe we're overreacting, but
unless things they have to radically change internally inside the program for something to happen. So what we saw on Saturday is not a turnaround next week kind of thing.
No,
I mean, there had to be a massive change in the house. And I'm still, as you can tell, I still can't fully believe it. Ryan Williams was kind of a non-factor in the game. He had a few catches, but it wasn't like he was any kind of threat during the game. I mean, every aspect of the game. I know they had some injuries, but there's one thing in having injuries and then also coming out like that, like they did. It was flat the whole game. They had an opening drive, and it was like, okay, they're going to roll. And then they really it just wasn't impressive the rest of the game. Had a couple of moments. You know, I know they have a new quarterback they're breaking in, but I still just can't believe it. And then, I mean, look at LSU. You know, LSU might have had the most impressive, showing of the week, going to Clemson on the road. At least Ohio State and Miami were home teams, right? LSU goes to Clemson at night. The primetime game when Clemson has tons of hype. You know, Klubnik's getting, top 10 draft hype, Heisman hype, and they go in there and shut Clemson down. 10 points. I mean,
second half they were really good on both sides of the ball too. I mean, just dominated the game. You know, there's the big debate about which Death Valley is real. You know, it's, at this point, I love both of those places. They're both different. They're both they're different, but they're great. But they went into Clemson's Death Valley and lowered the volume level tremendously. And by the end, all you could hear was the small slice of purple and gold fans chanting. I mean, that was a pretty amazing performance. Nussmeier really looked good. Really looked good at quarterback.
People are high on him. He's got a chance to be a first round guy, as what everyone's saying.
The other thing I would say is, as we overreact on LSU and we overreact on Clemson, is if we're going to overreact on Clemson, a lot of people were really, really high on them, thought they're going to be back, right? Well, it's very possible we've just sort of wished them back. That, what if they don't hit that long field goal against Indiana in the against not Indiana.
Louisville in the ACC game?
Yeah, Louisville in the ACC game. And they don't do that, and they don't end up in the playoff. What would we have been thinking about them coming into this year? Would we have been thinking, oh, they're a top 3, top 5 team, like, they ended up in all the preseason polls? And I don't know the answer to that, but they just look pretty average, like they've looked by their lofty standards of 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. Just don't look like the same program.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of their hype was because they gave Texas a fight for a while in the playoff. That's not enough. We got to see Klubnik be more clutch. You have to see Garrett Riley, dial it up. I mean, it looked for a minute like the inept Clemson offenses that led to them going to get Riley after Jeff Scott left. That in between season, in between period, and it's not looking good. The great news about I'm a big fan of a large playoff. I'm like 12 teams minimum. So what I love about that is Clemson can still build. They can get better. Come November, you beat South Carolina, which that's going to be a huge game this year. It's always a rivalry-wise a huge game, but it has a chance to be a national game. And then you win the ACC, which is, I'd say, pretty likely it's going to come down. I mean, they have a really good chance. Then you're rolling, right? You're rolling. So it could be a totally different team come November. And they're also playing LSU. That's the best team that they're going to play most likely the entire season, unless Miami continues to be what Miami is.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, I definitely. We'll see what Miami is. That was really impressive. And we'll get to that in just a second. Before we do Miami, though, let me say one thing. Brian Kelly had not won an opener at LSU, and it had become a thing. And so for them to win an opener, and it was obviously an important opener, tough one on the road, as you described. That's a big deal for the program kind of going forward. But then you couple it with what they look like, and you're like, hey, at least for right now, you start looking at sort of the SEC programs, you're like, okay, this could be the one that might be the super contender. It's way early, but at least after week one, you'd have to go, the LSU's been the most
LSU.
impressive.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
for sure.
Georgia didn't play anybody. I mean, that's part of the deal, right? That's part of week one, week two for these programs. So, okay, so teased it at the top, Ohio State, Texas, Arch Mania, and it didn't go so well for Arch Manning, young Arch Manning. I guess third year player making his first actual start as the guy. It's a tough place to try to do that against the defending national champs who have reloaded at their place. Super talented. Ohio State is doing that thing that Alabama used to do, and way back in the day, USC used to do, and Georgia does these days, where they reload stars like sharks reload teeth. That's what they're doing. And it was hard. It was difficult, but he looked, after all the hype about him going to be so great, it was really underwhelming performance, and he looked like a deer in the headlights at times.
Yeah, and this is not a true freshman we're talking about here. It's been a guy who's been in the program for 3 years, and it makes you there's a couple things are true at once. One, he's playing maybe the best defense in college football.
Right.
Again,
That's fair.
if they're not the best, they're right there. I know college football fans freak out about any statement they don't agree with. So if they're not the best, they're on Mount Rushmore probably right now, right?
Hey, Paul, they're not in the SEC.
Of course, they can't be good. Yeah. So, but hey, at least Tennessee had a lot of orange in the stadium in the playoffs, George. At least they did that. There's bonus points for that, apparently. But so one, that's true. He's not going to play a better defense than that the rest of the year. Okay, there's going to play some very good defenses, obviously very good defenses, but not to that level. And second, he made me sit there and go, I guess there's a reason why at the time he didn't beat out 7th round draft pick Quinn Ewers or undrafted free agent, whatever he was, Quinn Ewers. I don't remember which one he was. So I think Manny's going to be fine. Obviously, all the tools in the world are there, but I blame us more than I blame him. I mean, this hysteria around him is only because of his last name. Mm-hmm. I mean, if his name was, the last name was in Sarah or Schroeder, unless he maybe pronounced his name Jay Schrader, like Archie Schrader after he was Jay Schrader's son from the Raiders back in the day. But I mean, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now.
No, that's right. I mean, he would have been he's a 5-star or whatever because he's really talented. Okay.
Yeah, but there's lots of those now. All the Elite 11 guys, Yeah.
So we'd have been excited about him, but not like this. There would have been some trepidation about, okay, Quinn Ewers was a good, solid quarterback, and this guy's been highly touted. And so there's the normal fans want the next guy up, especially if he's highly touted. But it wouldn't have been anything like this. I mean, you have people like, it's Heismania for the guy. And it's like, look, I think he's going to be really good.
Oh, and the betting odds, he was number one. On the bottom of the screen, I'm reading the betting odds for Heisman. He's number one. I'm like, based on what?
It's crazy. It makes no sense at all.
And I think he's going to be a good quarterback. Don't get me wrong. I think he's going to be very good. I think he's going to be in the NFL. I think he's going to compete for national championships, all those things. But everyone just settle down. I mean,
new offensive linemen. I mean, basically they retooled the offensive line. There's a lot of things going against him. But I'll tell you, you could see from the very first play, the very first pass, they kind of rolled him out, and he was supposed to just kind of a little dump pass that was just supposed to sort of get him in rhythm. And he fired that thing, into the ground in front of the receiver who was, open. And you're like, okay, well, he's got some jitters, but it felt like really not until the very end did he really get rid of those jitters. And I thought he played well in the last few minutes of the fourth quarter, almost like they had to turn him loose. But it was just not a good. It was a win for those of us who get tired of hype. You know what I mean? And I wasn't rooting against Arch Manning. I'm just saying there's a whole lot of people that were like, as many people as were excited about all the hype and were getting out over their skis. And I'm telling you, I'm pastoring in Texas, right? We got Aggies and Longhorns, and the Longhorns all wanted to talk about Arch Manning going into the year. And I just kept saying, hey, I think he's going to be really good, but this is like way over the top.
Yeah, we don't know. There's no body of work. When he came in last year, and when Ewers got hurt, he was fine. He wasn't elite. So it really is. I really think it's our fault, like fans and media, of what the hysteria over. It's not. Here's what's so funny. It's not even Peyton's son. It's not even Eli's son. It's her nephew.
Yeah, it's Cooper. But Cooper was talented.
I know he's third generation. Yeah,
he was
sure.
also the wide receiver of the family before he had, I think, a spinal stenosis and he couldn't play in college, I think, or couldn't
Yeah,
play
and
past.
I get the third generation. That's, Archie Manning to a generation was a significant quarterback, but like Kurt Warner's son is in the NFL, right? Like, I'm not trying to say they're the same quarterback. Again, I think Arch is going to be great. I really do, but I don't think he's going to be light years ahead of anybody else or even close. And Ohio State's starting a first-time quarterback,
Yeah.
right? And a huge game, and they
Yeah,
lost
Julian's
Travion
saying
Henderson, and they lost
played pretty well.
yeah, they lost so many people. But they do reload. I think Ohio State's going to be really good. I didn't think they looked amazing, but when you play 1 versus 2, you're not supposed to look amazing. You're supposed to win.
Well, look at the run
That's the
they've
point.
had, and I'd have to go back and actually look at the sequence of games. But since they lost to that mediocre Michigan team, and everybody thought Ryan Day might not come back, all they've done is run through people, and I mean run through people, going through the playoffs, and then winning the national title. And then they didn't run through Texas, but they did play well. That is a run of just beating one college football powerhouse after another, after another, after another. And I realize it's a different year and it's a different team. I'm just saying that is quite a run, even for a storied program like that.
Absolutely. I mean, they're the program right now. Like, they're the program to take down. And I don't just mean in a regular season game. I mean a dethrone from a deep playoff run. Like, they're the team. It's people want to pretend it's Alabama. It's not. They have not been great for a couple of years now.
No, they've taken a step back. And Georgia may be still right there, but they've taken a couple step back.
Yeah, I'm not betting against Georgia. No way.
Now, I'm waiting on Georgia because quarterback's a thing for them. Gunnar Stockton, okay. I mean, we'll see, but I'm waiting on Georgia.
Speaking of which, Carson Beck, former Georgia quarterback,
That's
he
right.
looked good last night. Not perfect. It was really a Mario kind of game. One of my buddies is a coach, and I asked him before the game what he thinks is going to happen, and he said, I think it's going to be a Mario win. And what that means is at some point you're going to slow the game down. You're going to almost go into NFL mode where you're just trying to win, and you're trying to milk clock, and you're just trying to have the last possession and those type of things. And you saw that take place. It almost bit him in the rear end when they had 4 straight 3-and-outs and end of third quarter and into the fourth quarter because they got super conservative with the ball. But Notre Dame is a very good football team. They're going to be around. I love Marcus Freeman, CJ Carr. There's another legacy. Lloyd Carr's grandson comes in, and he's a gamer. He's a true freshman, and he had a lot of pressure on him. But if I'm a Notre Dame fan, I'm excited about the future of him. But for Miami fans, it is looking at the team and saying, okay, we were worried about wide receiver, and then a freshman, Malachi Toney steps up last night and has a huge game. A transfer from LSU and Liberty, my alma mater, has the catch of the year already the first week of the season in C.J. Daniels. And Carson Beck, who's not going to be Cam Ward, he can't be expected to be Cam Ward, he got it done. And it's become kind of a really neat story and almost like a media darling from a guy who was sort of an enemy and mocked as a bad guy, about as of a month ago. So Miami fans are really excited. No one's get their hopes up because we played this game before. But it was really, really neat to see I would say the Orange Bowl. It's my childhood. To see Hard Rock Stadium packed and alive. You see, South Florida is not a sports town.
Right.
It's an event town. And when the University of Miami is good and playing a good team at night, people are going to turn out and it's going to be an event. And that's what it was last night. Everybody, Mike Glover on the sidelines and Edgerrin James and Andre Johnson and Jim Kelly was there. Trick Daddy, the rapper, Stephen A. Smith was there. Ron DeSantis was there. it was quite the event. So it was pretty exciting for Miami, who plays Bethune-Cookman this coming week, then plays University of South Florida, who the Gators play this Saturday, and then the big Florida game the week after that.
Well, you mentioned all the other celebrities were there, but the Inseras were there too.
We were there.
Some group of y'all, right? So,
oh yeah,
you enjoyed that, obviously.
It was great. It was just a lot of fun. I thought it was going to go overtime. I really did. And Miami's kicker, who's a transfer, was 4 for 10 in his career on field goals. 4 for 10, and he made 2. Made 2 during the game, and especially the go ahead. So it was a great atmosphere, a lot of fun, and I think Miami has a chance to have a really big year.
If you wanted to overreact on the ACC from week 1, which is what we're doing in week 1, would you suddenly go, okay, Miami looks like a contender? Obviously, look, they're ranked in the top 10, okay? But Florida State is a lot better. Would you say Florida State's a lot better, or are we just sort of jury still out there? And then what would you say about Clemson? Those are the 3 that we'd be thinking about after week 1.
Yeah, I think 2 things are true at the same time about Florida State. I think Florida State is certainly better. I mean, there's any question about that. And I think we're too enthralled with Alabama's uniform. and we think they're the Nick Saban Alabama of 5 years ago, not the Alabama of right now. I think both those things are true at the same time. Miami, interior, they're so, Mario Cristobal came in and said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to build the interior lines, and we're going to be really tough. And those two things were evident last night. I mean, they were interior and they were really tough. They were just hitting. They didn't get winded. You didn't see guys falling out with cramps the whole game, the first game of the season. So that continues. I mean, I think that Miami can have a really good year. But when you've never won an ACC championship, you can't say anything or get too excited until you actually get there and do that. So it's kind of a let's see. You could say that Miami fans are from Missouri. We're saying show me, right? It's the book of James. Okay, we got faith, but got to see some works here. We got to see some deeds. So ACC overreaction is Florida State's definitely better. I think Louisville's going to be strong. SMU is going to be strong again. Not quite as good as last year, but strong. And then Clemson's still the class. They're still the class of the ACC until otherwise. And I think that's just a reality.
All right, so I've got our older son George and I actually went to a Friday night game. We skipped Friday Night Lights in Texas, for which I will receive some grief for, but that's okay. And went to Waco and watched his alma mater, Baylor. He graduated a year ago. Play Auburn, and that was a fun game if you're a Baylor fan until it wasn't. And so I just. We're probably not going to talk a lot about Baylor, and we may not talk a lot about Auburn because I don't know what we really learned about Auburn, except that they're better than they were a year ago. I would be super concerned, though, still. Jackson Arnold doesn't look like he's transformed into a marvelous passer, which he wasn't a year ago, but also when he was at Oklahoma, they were down their top 6 receivers for the vast majority of the year. I mean, that'll make things hard on a seasoned veteran, much less a first-year starter.
He can run.
He can run, but it appears that he's still kind of a one-read, and then if it's not there, go kind of guy.
Yeah, that doesn't last.
Well, and he ran for 100 and some odd yards and was really the difference. That was the difference in the game, was his running ability, which Baylor did not account for. But I would be really concerned about that if he has to run that much. Because first of all, you're going to get hurt. Secondly, some people aren't going to let you do it. They're going to be better defensively. A lot of teams they're going to play are going to be better defensively than Baylor showed up on Friday night. So, but it's a good win for Hugh Freeze. He needed that.
Definitely.
Well, you want to talk about impatient places. That's one of them, right? Now it helps.
Yeah.
It definitely helps if you're an Auburn fan that Alabama is not what it was several years ago, because that was an impossible situation to be an Auburn coach. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. And one other thing I really wanted to hit is I'm one of the 3.5 million or however many it was that tuned in to the vast majority of College Game Day on Saturday, and certainly made sure I was on the last 15 minutes or 20 minutes watching for Lee Corso, his final headgear picks. And by the way, he went 6-for-6, and then he put Brutus the Buckeye on.
Including picking his alma mater, Florida State.
Including picking Florida State, and went 6-for-6. Picked the Buckeyes. Obviously, we talked about how that one came out. Frankly, to me, it was a bittersweet moment. I wouldn't claim to know Lee Corso. I've met him. We've spoken over the years. And back in the day, you would call him up if you wanted to ask a question or get some quotes for a story or something like that. And I'm talking about way back in the day when I was in Oklahoma City or the columnist in Eugene, Oregon. And you would call the Ticonderoga Pencil Company, because that's where he kept his office there. But the guy is part of the fabric of college football, those headgear picks. And it's been, however many, 15, 16, 17 years since he had a stroke, and he was never the same after that. But the fact you could tell how much that group loved him and the way they sort of were able to help keep him going and help him along. I really love watching Kirk Herbstreit's care for him on air through the years.
That's a neat relationship.
It really
From a
is.
distance, it's obvious that it really is. And yeah, I thought that was really fantastic. I love the Ohio State band, who I think is just the fantastic band. Big Ten is, just miles above bands, of other
That's right.
conferences. Big Ten
That's right.
bands are the best. When they spelled out Corso, that was really neat. They were the first to do it that day. And while he's sitting there making the pick, it was just a really neat experience, really neat atmosphere. And also the first ever headgear he did was in Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
It's now to be the last one to do Columbus. So we're kind of an end of an era, right? Like we're experiencing a lot of end of the eras. We talk about faith here on this podcast, and there's been kind of the end of an era when it comes to faith the last few years, when Tim Keller passing away, with James Dobson, this past week, John MacArthur, R.C. Sproul not long ago. These kind of end of an eras that we're going through right now. And it seems like that in a sports world and just cultural world, because college football is such a big fabric of cultural America, especially east of the Mississippi River, that here we are seeing an end of an era pass right in front of us. And then a beginning of a new one with Bill Belichick going to North Carolina.
Hey, by the way, quick note, TCU was the opening opponent for Deion's first game at Colorado.
Yes.
Now, that was in Fort Worth. And now they're, in Chapel Hill, and they're the first opponent for Bill Belichick, the latest fascinating guy. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and TCU lost to Colorado, and Deion went and lectured everybody about not believing and yelled at the media. And 3 years later, he's losing to Georgia Tech in the opener in Boulder.
Yep. Haynes King.
Yep. Hey,
despite turnovers.
My guy. That's my guy.
But he's a player, man.
I call him the best player in college football nobody knows about.
He's a gamer. So one thing related to game day is the Corso headgear pick and the way game day was throughout the years and there were a couple of characters that would change from time to time, but Corso being there and Herbstreit being there and Chris Fowler, and then Reese Davis for so many years, sort of being the three.
And Craig James out of the gate when they first started,
way back.
And then he left to go NFL.
I'm just going to say we've had so much change in college football that's not as, like the fabric has been ripped apart and things like that. The Pac-12 going away, stuff like that. And I know there's a Pac-12. I'm sorry, guys. You know what I mean? This is part of the fabric of college football that we're going to miss a ton too. And that's Lee Corso and the headgear picks. You're not going to try to redo that, but I also think you lose something of the show's innocence in some ways when essentially Lee Corso gets replaced by Pat McAfee. Essentially, Fox Big Noon Saturday puts up Dave Portnoy from Barstool Sports. And it's something more crass that has emerged in those shows than what it used to be. And maybe that's inevitable, but it's part of the coarsening of our culture, our larger culture. And I hate that. You saw that maybe with game day, with sort of how they've introduced sports betting into their conversations and stuff like that on the air. But I hate it. I hate it. And I don't have anything against Pat McAfee or Dave Portnoy. I just think those are different shows, or at least College Game Day. Let's just stick with them. That's a different show now than it was then.
Yeah. And Nate Bargatze in his fame all across the board, way beyond believers, all across mainstream America with SNL. He's host on SNL, has a Christmas special on main, network. I think he has shown us you don't have to be that way. You don't have to be crass in order to still attract an audience, including males. You don't have to do that. So we love college football. We love nostalgia. And it's not just us here as pastors. Many people aren't even believers. They love college football for the nostalgia and for the stories and for the matchups and the rivalries and the passion. And if you took away that, I don't think game day would miss a beat. Yeah, McAfee's a star. Again, I'm not anti-McAfee. I think he, can be entertaining. But I mean, I think people are tuning in to watch Kirk Herbstreit. They're turning in to watch Nick Saban do a chalk talk, and go through a breakdown. And they're going through the old Tom Rinaldi stories. I know he's a Fox now, but the old, Rinaldi stories and this type of thing. So I think I just don't think it's necessary. And I think Bargatze has proven that, because you're not going to hear him cuss. You're not going to hear him make sexual humor. You're gonna, he's gonna poke fun. He's gonna have a good time. And he's gonna be sarcastic and those kind of things. But there's lines that he's not going to cross, apparently. And so, again, I agree with you that it's unfortunate.
Well, look, we could keep talking about all this, but week one has been tremendous, and we'll see what unfolds, and maybe we'll talk about it in week two with Bill Belichick's debut.
You know who else we didn't talk about that we missed last week? Is the Utah Utes.
Hey,
they're rolling. They destroyed UCLA, and we did our Big 12 talk last week. We forgot to talk about Utah.
We were rolling on everybody. We
were rolling on everybody else. We forgot maybe the best team in the whole conference.
Yeah, you're right. And that's, you forget Utah at your own peril, because those guys, you better pack a lunch.
Yeah, I think Whittingham likes it that way. He wants us to forget.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, no, that's right. And they look really tough. They look like your sort of trademark Kyle Whittingham team. And you're right. They were in the Rose Bowl just running roughshod over UCLA. I mean, it was a really good situation. By the way, did you see the monster spaceship that almost landed at Lubbock?
I did not
Yeah.
see that.
It was the biggest sort of storm cloud you've ever seen. Anyway, no big deal. We'll just keep moving forward. We'll keep moving forward here. This week is not going to be, and I'm talking about week 2, as you guys are listening, what's coming up in the next few days, not going to be quite as exciting as week 1. And part of that's because it's not week 1, but uh, anything that you're really excited about, game day is going to be at Michigan and Oklahoma. I love that for the fact that it's 2 of the top winningest programs in history. I don't know what I think about either program. They both won convincingly. They're both ranked in the teens, and that's fine. But I don't look at either one of them at the moment like I'm thinking, oh, that looks like a playoff team.
Yeah, I'm saying, okay, not 2 not elite teams, but give me the Blue Bloods all day long. I'll definitely be watching that game. The uniforms and the history, we can never lose that. That's part of what makes our game great that we love, right? Is that for me, I always like a good rivalry. So Iowa State, I'll pay attention to that for sure, just because of the rivalry.
For sure.
And also just because I'm interested, I want to see how good are the Florida Gators. And I think South Florida playing them this week will let us see a little bit of how good they really are. Is Lagway the real deal? He's healthy, apparently. I think he's healthy. So I'm paying attention to that game. I know that on the national scene, you go, okay, USF versus Florida. Really? Is that a big deal? I'm not saying that game's a big deal. I'm saying it's going to show us, if they destroyed Boise State.
Yeah.
I mean, so this is not a bad football team. And I think it's going to maybe give us a glimpse of what's going on down in Gainesville this year, and seeing if Billy Napier has his thing on the right track. So I will definitely pay attention to that game as well.
I'm glad you mentioned that last, and we got to get out of here and go to the second half. But Boise State, I don't care if they're on the road or not. They usually don't lose openers, but they don't get blown out. And they don't get blown out. They don't get blown out when they're playing the Power 4 programs. And here they are playing USF and got their heads handed to them. And I don't know what that means, but it is something we're going to be watching for sure.
Yes.
So, all right. Look, we've got a lot more to talk about, and I know we're not talking about every single game that could happen this weekend, that will happen this weekend, but we'll get there. And we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll be back for the second half, and we'll talk about faith. Be right back right after this. And welcome back to Gridiron the Gospel. This is the second half in which we get to talk about our faith in Christ, that's the reason for this podcast. As much as you and I love college football, my hope is it's a platform for the gospel. And so I'm George Schroeder. He's Dean and Sarah. And one of the things, when Brad and I were doing this, we had a segment called On My Heart, and we may end up doing that again. It was my favorite thing to do. And it was just like, what's God impressing on you right now? Right. And so I just think that's a great way to go about doing things. But 2 things. First, let's start out by talking about the buzz that I think probably was felt around Tallahassee. You had a tweet, Dean, Saturday night, and it's real, I think. I'm going to find this tweet. Shout out to Tallahassee church attendance being legit tomorrow across the city.
Yeah.
Tell us what you mean by that, and then what the atmosphere would have been like in Tallahassee.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had pastors tell me when we first started the church, more seasoned guys in town, at the time, that Florida State football wins and losses directly impacts church attendance. And that's absolutely true. And it's not just wins and losses, it's kickoff time. So when they schedule 8:00 games, we're like, oh, great. There's going to be nobody at the 8:30 service tomorrow, kind of thing. It's really a reality. It just comes first. And I don't mean that in a positive way. And this is not even like as diehard a football town as some other places are. The stadium holds under 70,000 people now. Like it's not, they love their team, but we're not talking about College Station or Knoxville or, Baton Rouge level, of crazy, but it's definitely a passionate fan base. But yeah, so people, they wear their Florida State polos to church the next day. I mean, it's like, it really is like an identity thing. And I think God gives us good things to enjoy. And I think it's that we should not apologize for loving the sport and caring about it and wanting to go to games. And I think those are good things. But when that really is the most important thing in your finances, where people spend more money, on their season tickets than they give to the church, or the mission they're giving to is to further the football program, rather than anything else. I do think it's fair for Christians to ask questions about those things and to kind of push one another and spur one another and go, okay, like what are that's for anything, for hunting season, for golf, for fishing, for your kids' vacations. I mean, like all of it. I think we always had to go, okay, what is like driving our life? Like, what is the most important thing? And I think
Youth sports, whatever, those
I
weekend
think
tournaments. Yeah.
Colossians, where Paul writes, Christ, who is your life, when he appears, and that's the expectation. So, but again, I don't think the other side is to give people a hard time for loving football. I think God gives us good things to enjoy. And so, and I think that it can be really discouraging for a pastor, though, in my role, when you see that nothing can come between life and Florida State football, nothing. But something can seem to always come before church. So, but rather than like gripe about it, we just try to disciple people through it, and push people to really what this really means. And you can love football and still make your faith in the local church more important than that. And there's not a person in the world who would say that football is more important than their faith. No one would ever say that in a million years. But functionally, sometimes it's going, well, nothing can ever come in the way of this. Like, it is locked in as the most significant thing these days. I think that's a fair conversation to have.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I love the fact that you're like, hey, we're not going to like say you're wrong for loving college football. Look, if we did that, we're both in trouble.
Sure.
Because we both love college football, and we just talked college football for 30 some odd minutes just previous to this, and we could have talked for 2 hours. What I want is and that just flows naturally because it's what we think about and we care about and we love. What I want is for college football not to be the most important thing in your life or anything that's, because it's got to be God. Otherwise you have an idol, right? Whatever it is, that's not God, that's not Christ. So what I want is for you can't help but talk about Jesus because of how much you love him. And that doesn't mean you never talk about college football. It doesn't mean you don't still bubble up with college football. It just means that what people think about when they think about you is that guy is always talking about Jesus.
Yeah, and it's easy to pick on football. I never heard anyone tell a stay-at-home mom who's 40, you're just too into the, to the royal family. I think it just might be an idol in your life. You just like the crown a little too much. I've never heard anyone say, you're sourdough bread. You're just, I'm really afraid it's going to become an idol in your life. But it's easy to pick on football. So I don't think the answer is to make people like football less.
No.
I think the answer is to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, right? And to love Jesus more. I think that's the answer. And so I think that's important for us to talk about this time of year when so much of the culture is consumed in it.
Just as we get set, right? We're finally into the middle or not in the middle, but we're finally into the thick of the season. It's started. It's full go. It's like, hey, y'all, if you're listening to us, it's like there's a heart check that I have to have. I came to church. We're recording on Monday night, but I came to church yesterday morning, and 3 or 4 of my guys had on Aggie shirts. You had a couple of guys who were still going to be burnt orange, and I appreciate that about them. But the conversation that flows naturally is all the stuff that happened in the games. And I don't have any issue with that, but it always makes me go, man, I wish the conversation was, look what Jesus is doing in my life. And I don't mean in place of us not talking about football. I just mean I'd love to see that happen.
Yeah, well,
2 or 3 times.
Both and is often the answer, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm with you on that.
All right, one other thing. So this is a question that I have for you as a seasoned pastor, all right? Taught on Sunday from Colossians 4, verse 2, Paul says to the Colossians, devote yourselves to prayer, stay alert in it with thanksgiving. So it's just basically devote yourselves to prayer. It doesn't specify what kind it is. He just says devote yourselves to prayer. It's a prescription where in Acts 2 you have the church where it's described as being devoted to prayer, right? The earliest church. But this church here, the Colossians, devote yourselves to prayer, stay alert with it or in it with thanksgiving. At the same time, he said, and here comes a prayer request, pray also for us, pray for me, Paul, that God will open a door to us for the word to speak the mystery of Christ, for which I'm in chains. He's in prison, right? So, of course, he's going to say, pray that God will open the door. But it's not the prison door. He's not even looking for like a move to a better cell block. He wants a door of opportunity to share the gospel. And that's his prayer request. And I say all that to say, when you look at sort of the different prayers that Paul prays in his letters for these different folks, he prays that he would be bold about sharing the gospel the way he should, as he says here in verse 4. He prays that people would be strengthened and grow in Christ and things like that. What we don't see him pray much for, and maybe it's just because of the nature of the letter, is we don't see him pray a ton for all the physical things, so-and-so's
Yeah, some.
illness.
He does some, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we see some of that. That's right. But I would say this, our church would agree we need to pray more as individuals and as believers. I mean, and as corporately as a church. Okay. So this is where I'm going with this. When we pray more individually and corporately as a church, how can we take the vast majority of our prayer requests, which are about physical ailments and issues and needs and temporal things, then they're important. They're important, and we're supposed to pray for them. We're supposed to pray for in everything, right? And they're important, but how do we're rarely praying for spiritual things, for growth of our fellow believers and ourselves, for the lost. How do we encourage that? And this is me as a newish pastor to you as a guy who's been around for a while.
I think it's really important, and I think that's really a great question. I think things are taught and caught. I know it sounds kind of cliche, but I really do believe that. So one, I think that the prayers of the pastor and the church leaders need to often focus on spiritual needs and also on the lost. But when we teach people to pray, I mean, I wouldn't be afraid for a pastor out there or a Sunday school teacher or Bible study leader who has prayer time before or after their small group, whatever it might be, to begin by saying, hey, well, we're going to take some prayer requests. And what I'd love to do first is for everyone to name somebody in their life who doesn't know Jesus that we can pray for. Where you teach that kind of stuff. So we're still going to talk about Aunt Betty's hip, and the Algebra 2 test tomorrow. Like we're still going to pray for that. But hey, here's the first thing we're going to do. Or let's all pray for our hearts, and how their spiritual hearts are. And so I really, when we do a prayer time, like as a church staff, especially, I always want to include that in our prayer time is, hey, everyone pray right now first for somebody out there who doesn't know Christ, who you've invited to church for God to do a work in their life, to open their eyes, open their hearts, eyes to see, hearts to receive, minds to understand, ears to hear the good news. And I would teach that, is like, this is like what we do first. Like, this is the most important thing. Jesus left the 99 to go find the one. Like, he showed his priority in doing that. That needs to be our prayer priority as well. So that's what I think, that's really to pray also for like the unity of the church. Jesus modeled that. So I think it's caught and taught. So I need to see you do it in a church setting about what you pray for. Like one thing I pray regularly in our sermons every Sunday, I pray before I preach. One of the things I pray is that the enemy stays away. So I hope that I've been doing that for years. And I really mean that prayer, but I hope by me praying that our church is aware there is an enemy, right? That is a real thing, because they hear their pastor mention the enemy every single week. So I think there's that teaching time. There's times where I don't do this every week, this part, but I might just have a time of prayer where I ask people where they're sitting to pray. I'll say, hey, now I'm going to lead you in a prayer prompt, and I'll put something on the screen, like pray right now that God would have you do this. And usually I always include, now take a time to pray for somebody who doesn't know Jesus, kind of idea. So I just think that Jerry Falwell, when I was at Liberty, Jerry Falwell Sr., when I was a student at Liberty back in 2000, fall 99 through 2003, he used to always tell us at our convocations that nothing of eternal significance happens apart from prayer. Nothing of eternal significance happens apart from prayer. And I think that's that, because prayer is the means that God uses to accomplish his divine will. Yeah, there's mystery to it. Yes, he knows beforehand. I think not only does he know, he ordains. I think he's all sovereign, but prayer is the divine means he uses to accomplish that will. I don't fully understand it. I don't think I'm supposed to, but that is the mystery of it, and we're invited to participate in that. Like, think about this for a minute. Like, we have the ear of our Creator. How amazing is that? Like, we have his ear, and so I think we need to pray about the things that Jesus cared about most, which were those who are far from him, and also he cared for his sheep, right? So the unity of the body, they'd be one, So I think those are the things we need to be regular as our prayer requests as a church when we gather together.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And it's interesting that you say that, because a few weeks from now, we're going to have some evangelism training and encouraging, and in talking through sort of this on Sunday, I basically just said, I encourage people to sign up and plan to participate. But here's the thing, man, methods and strategy and things like that. We are supposed to know how to share the gospel well, right? And we ought to be winsome and persuasive at the same time. God opens hearts, right? It's
Absolutely.
not us.
Yeah, we better hope so.
But what I said was, right now, even as I'm encouraging you to sign up, I want you to think of that friend or family member who needs Jesus, and know who it is. You're thinking of that person right now. You know who they are. And right now, I would like for you to pray, God, would you open a door to share the gospel with them? mean, kind of like what Paul had asked the Colossians to
Yes.
pray. Would you begin working in their hearts right now? And I said, I challenge you to pray for them every day between now and the date that we're going to have the
Great.
deal. So I'm going to try to continue to remind people to do that. That's one of the things that I think it's been a thing for me as the Lord has grown me in my Christian life. And I've got a long way to go, first of all, just in priority of prayer, the emphasis of prayer. I mean, prayer is the work, right? It's not
Prayer is the work.
something
I
you
love
do
that. Yeah.
at the end, and it's not something you only do for preparation. It's preparation. It's all the way through. It's at the end. And you can have all the strategy you want. If you're not praying, it's worthless, and you're just building your own stuff. But even as I prayed, it's a whole lot easier oftentimes to pray for the various sort of temporal prayer requests. And again, please don't hear like me talking those down by saying they're temporal. I'm just saying your eyes are set on earthly things, and it's important to pray for them, right? For illness or for
Sure. Oh yeah,
a
God cares
raise
about that. Yeah.
or for whatever else. We're supposed to ask for those things. We're supposed to bang boldly on heaven's door. That's what the way he wants us to do it. We don't have to creep timidly in and say, hey, if you got a second, I got a prayer request. But one of the things that's been an issue for me in my life that I think he's begun to really work in my heart is praying for others in their spiritual needs, wherever they are, whether they're walking with Christ and you want them to be strengthened, or whether they don't know Jesus, they're far from him. And so it's like, I appreciate what you just said. And I hope some of our listeners maybe are going, I need to revamp how I pray, reorient what my focus is. First of all, are you praying? And then secondly, what are you praying about, or what's the most important thing? Anyway, I don't know
Amen.
exactly where I was going with that. It's just,
That's great.
it's most definitely on my heart. So, well, we got a whole lot more coming. A whole lot more coming this
A lot
this
more
season.
coming. It's early. It's September 1st when we're recording this. So we got a lot of football coming.
September 1st. Yeah, exactly. And just a programming note, this is obviously, you're listening to this on Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday of this week between week 1 and week 2. Because of Labor Day, we waited until tonight to record it. We'll be recording Sunday evenings almost every week with the hopes of posting the podcast on Mondays just from now on. So be watching your inboxes on that. And let me just say this, if you've got a topic that you'd like for us to talk about, or if you've got a question or comment, you can email us at gridirongospelpod@gmail.com. You can reach out to us on Twitter at George Schroeder and at Dean and Sarah. I think I got that right this week. And we would love to hear from you. And please, the only other thing I would say is, if you haven't subscribed and you like what you hear, go ahead and subscribe and hit the like button. That helps a lot too. We're on all the podcasting platforms. And if you really are brave and unconcerned, you can check us out on YouTube as well. So I'm George Schroeder. He's Dean in Sarah. And we would love for you to tune in next week for more Gridiron in the Gospel, a faith and college football podcast.